Welcome. My name is Dr. Patrick Corbett, and I am an assistant professor in the Professional and Technical Writing program at New York City College of Technology, CUNY, CityTech for short. This is a re-recording of my AI Humanities presentation delivered 4 times in India in September 2023, as a Speaker of Eminence talk at the University of Allahabad, as a keynote talk at an international seminar at Banaras Hindu University, and as a special invited lecture at the Central University of South Bihar and DAV University Jalandhar. As we begin, I hope you notice that I used AI tools to generate this presentation. They were my conversation partners, to whom I gave my lecture and image ideas and then used their output to build most of what you see here. Let's begin. The big question: where will AI take the humanities? The humanities focuses on exploring the essence of subjective meaning and how that meaning is made. Whatever field one engages in the humanities, from literature to the digital humanities, a focus exists on cultural production, particularly through the creation, circulation, and reception of its artifacts. Things like novels, comic books, catalog items on a museum website, or even graffiti are all potential subjects. Humanities bridges domains, fields, and areas of interest in search for new subjects to study. Of course, artificial intelligence, AI, is going to be immensely interesting to humanists. Yes, it is also a mechanistic subject, but it's an artifact of culture, and a special one because it is also a new means of production that we are just beginning to wrap our heads and imaginations around to understand what it allows us to do and the consequences of doing it. The humanities is a natural place to explore the influence of AI on how we compose meaning in our own lives as well. Let's look at 2 reasons. First, AI provides us with a new order of communicative tool to generate and organize information and ideas. We can use AI to produce coherent, cohesive, and developed chunks of pre-organized content in multiple modalities and across multiple media. We can control the input and output parameters of production with some precision and without much training or practice. Until very recently, this was impossible. Software that mimicked typical human-like generative abilities was confined to research labs. Now, it's an out-of-the-box solution available to anyone who can pay a monthly fee. The second reason the humanities is interested in AI, or should be, is because AI can create its own information for itself, and the long-term consequences of this are both unknown and very interesting. AI is the evolution of something called the symbolic machine, which is a type of information tool capable of operating independently of one-to-one human input. Conceptually, AI functions by ingesting various corpora of symbolic artifacts and then organizing and outputting different algorithmically determined bodies of symbolic artifacts. These resultant artifacts are not predictable based on the input. We call this capacity for creating something unexpected and complex emergent. As emergent systems, symbolic machines are able to adapt to new inputs and produce unexpected outputs based on them. So, in short, they can surprise us with things that we hadn't thought of before, and sometimes those things are quite consequential. The capacity for symbolic machines to make meaning raises very human questions. How do we use AI to create meaning? Is the meaning created by AI equivalent to the meaning created by you or me, the people? If 2 machines are sharing meaning created by a third machine, do we even call it meaning by human measure if no human eyes set upon it? This reminds me of the Zen koan. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? All of these questions are stock and trade for humanists, humanists in various fields, because the humanities insists on exploring the human subject and human activity with complexity. We don't overlook these kinds of questions because humanists are driven to look beyond information and beyond data to the manifest impact of these phenomena on the individual, on collectives, and on culture more generally. The humanities reminds us that no matter how technical the subject, our discussion of it rests within the human realm. And the advent of AI then reminds us that humanistic perspectives are just as important to innovation and inspiration as good engineering practice and science. Why do I say this is so? The humanities helps us forge and appreciate our connection to the human dimension of our world. The humanities also reminds us that we occupy this world not with just our machines and the other things that we build, but also people with whom we share similarities and differences. And these similarities and differences can be profound. The humanities reminds us to keep our fellow humans in mind in all of their complexity as we engage in our technological pursuits. Now, this is not a utopian statement, even though it sounds like one. It is a practical statement. If we eliminate a humanistic understanding of technologies like AI, if we rely purely on mechanistic and absolutist frameworks to understand these advanced machines, we do so at our own peril. It won't be us, the individuals, who benefit from any lack of nuanced consideration. Why do I say this? Because the communicative tools and the symbolic machines of our lives do not exist in an ideological vacuum. They are human-conceived instruments designed for particular purposes and used in specific ways this presentation discusses. Further, we have developed an intimate relationship with these tools. We have grown dependent on them, and perhaps complacently so, to create and share larger and larger swaths of meaning in our lives. Despite our reliance on these tools, we don't often consider the impact they have on our selfhood. We don't always recognize that our individual autonomy in our own lives is inseparable from our ability to make choices, to have agency, and demonstrate freedom, or our desire of these things. Now, the antithesis of these values, coercion, rigidity, even tyranny, have historically shown that they are right at the threshold if we fail to remain aware of these threats and position ourselves not just individually, but collectively to resist them. If we fail to pursue a better understanding of how AI is designed and used in ways that are contrary to the values of humanism, it's certainly going to impact our ability to create meaning that's aligned with the values of choice, agency, freedom, and so on, and the ability to use them democratically in society. Let me explain why I'm suspicious. I'm passionate about the critical role of the humanities in both education and society, but this is a role that I often have to explain, even defend, even in my everyday professional life. You see, my typical collaborator is as likely to be a scientist or an engineer as it is a similarly trained colleague in the humanities. I often have to advocate for the individual human to remain at the center of our work. This is not an impeachment of my wonderful colleagues, their interests, or their beliefs. They are good people, but we are trained to focus on different things. Luckily, we all typically agree that the best result is when our competing perspectives are each well represented in the decisions that we make collectively. CityTech is the dedicated undergraduate STEM institution of the City University of New York, CUNY. The numbers tell us that we are the leading urban university in the United States and the principal economic and social ladder out of poverty for 55,000 or so students who graduate every year. We are highly ranked because of the socioeconomic value we provide to our graduates and their communities. But the reason we can accomplish our mission with recognized success is that despite being a technology campus, despite being the STEM unit of CUNY, CityTech's key value proposition is our deeply multidisciplinary ethos and our ability to integrate within our institutional strategy, the humanities, and all of our liberal arts with our STEM programs. We do this because we understand that studying the humanities contributes depth and breadth to all modalities of thinking. Pairing the humanities with STEM encourages students to think dynamically, developing and shifting between conceptual frames of reference. The confluence of these different domains allows us to create opportunity for fluency in multiple symbolic systems, which in turn allows graduates to create and organize ideas into robust frameworks of knowledge. I'm telling you this because, as a dedicated humanist in a STEM institution, that is what I do. It's my vocation. I help people make meaning from the raw materials of their experience, no matter what that experience is or where people may have found it. But I'm often that professor as well, the one who is relentlessly advocating for people to be at the center of our work and not disciplinary fields or ideologies. That's because my ideological drive is rooted in working with the individual. As such, my work is often seen as a service to the college, perhaps even less important than our larger institution level concerns or the appeals to my field that I make through my scholarship. But I don't see it that way. I'm happy to remind anyone who challenges that I'm not just teaching students to interpret a film, write an essay, or find textual research on some topic or another. AI can do that now more easily than we like to admit, and it's getting better and better. What I'm actually doing when I work with individuals is I show them how to develop a perspective that furthers their evolution as powerful thinkers and as educated citizens of the world. There is an exchange of understanding there, a connection, a recognition, and an embrace of the person in all of their contextual complexity at the moment that they need it the most. And while AI might contribute to this effort, no AI present or on the horizon can do this work for them or for me, especially in an environment like City Tech, which is intensely multicultural. I have personally taught students from more than 100 countries, and it only took 4 years to reach that milestone, and I stopped counting. I have worked diligently to get to know each one of my students as individual learners. Learning to compose meaning and communicate across a mosaic of cultures in a global environment is a challenge that AI is not up to. But I'm here to tell you that we as people are, and it is desperately needed by the humanist and scientist alike. In a STEM environment like City Tech, the humanities trains students to see and communicate perspectives and possibilities that would be impossible through their technical training alone. The humanities help students put themselves at the center of change by developing their self-awareness and orienting their purpose towards a recognition that the problems of the world require more than technical knowledge to solve. They require wisdom because real problems are not just messy and complex, they're also inseparable from human endeavor. As such, the humanities are invaluable to the business of innovation, even though it's often seen as irrelevant, or more commonly, in my experience, it's just invisible. I would also like to add, emphatically, that speaking for my work, which has also included building, funding, assessing, managing, and reporting on programs, 80% of my work is dreadfully boring. I don't like to do it. The other 20% is great. Amazing one-on-one interactions with incredible people, traveling and sharing worldviews with people all over the world, students and colleagues and people alike. I live for that 20%, and I will do whatever it takes to enjoy that part. The rest, though, I wouldn't do it if I didn't have to. It's repetitive, it's time consuming, it's easy to introduce errors. So I automate it. Or if I'm lucky, someone else automated it before me and I can incorporate their tools into my work. Routine communications, document creation and distribution, data collection, assessments, grade calculations, citations, and anything else I can responsibly automate any portion of, I do. I have to in order to even have a hope of getting everything done that my job requires. Part of innovation is using the tools and processes afforded by technology to do the parts that we don't want to do or can't do ourselves, or that we could do better with well-tooled machines. If you think about it, this fundamentally changes the nuts and bolts activities of our work. By that, I mean it changes the processes of how we create meaning by changing the tools and activities that we use to do so. It even changes the meaning that we must necessarily create because different tools and their uses lead to different outcomes through different processes of thinking and work activities. For example, 5 years ago, I would have used PowerPoint and Word to create this presentation. I rarely use either anymore. Here, I've used Google Docs, Zotero, Canva, Facebook Messenger, Bing, AI, Chrome, GPT, Gamma, Midjourney, Animatica, LinkedIn, Adobe Creative Suite, and a few other plugins for ideation, project organization, design, image generation, idea parsing, fact-checking, and other tasks. As I said, these tools have changed, radically so, the focus of my attention and the activities to which I have devoted my time while building the presentation that I've prepared here. And as these machines, these tools, become more adept at interpreting my needs and providing some value to my workflow, I have become increasingly reflective and dependent on my use of them. Division of labor and automation have been with us long before digital technology, even before electricity. But it's in the late digital age that we experience the power of the symbolic machine, where I am using all of these tools to enhance tremendously my capacity to locate, store, retrieve, manipulate, and communicate information to you. I'm doing so with continuously evolving systems that allow me to mix access with my existing knowledge, my physical library, my digital library, a cadre of peers and experts available almost on command through social media, my previous work product, and my own emergent ideas that are enhanced with and compared to the emergent ideas and structures of various AI tools. There is an expanded mind. Here, in this presentation, I've used all of these together to create a presentation that I simply could never have accomplished with PowerPoint and Word, or even the suite of tools that I used last year. Automation is everywhere. Our civilization has invented symbol inscribing, symbol storing, symbol manipulating, and now symbol creating machines to do the boring and difficult tasks for us, to make our lives easier, and to accomplish things that we simply could not have accomplished with our voice alone. I've used the term symbolic machine, first theorized by the Danish semiotician Parage Brandt, because it describes these digital machines that allow us to automate routine informational tasks. Symbolic machines can make a range of information decisions for us and organize digital information that they consume or create so that we may make more complex strategic decisions with that information. Perhaps even more importantly for us to consider, symbolic machines allow us to modularize these activities and processes, so-called black boxing them, where we don't need to think about them too much. We don't even really need to know the details of how they work, or these days, even how to use it effectively. We just need to be able to input enough guidance and information for it to learn from us and guide us to use them to create better information for our own needs. We're being taught by AI. The semiotics of interacting with symbolic machines is an entry point to understanding our relationship with AI. We rely on AI more and more to automate the conceptual inputs and outputs of our work and our lives. At the same time, we can and do interact with AI while thinking about it less and less, except when it is staring us in the face. And when it does, we shudder as our symbolic machines have crossed the uncanny valley of creating meaning. With AI, we can no longer tell the difference between man-made and machine-made meaning. Further, AI is blackboxing more and more complex processes, making increasingly complex decisions for itself. In a world that is now almost completely mediated by digital information, this is consequential. AI is poised to be at the center of our digital lives. We don't know how the story of humanity's interaction with AI will end, but we can examine how it's beginning. We can pay attention to how it's progressing. In the last 18 months, we have witnessed a fundamental change with the explosion of consumer-facing AI-driven information services. These have redefined the possibilities, the workflows, and the expectations associated with generating information and ideas that can be used to share information with others and make decisions in complex and consequential situations. I think in every field, AI is forcing people to think about their relationship to knowledge work, and not just the boring or the hard parts that I like to joke about. Summarizing several recent studies, the IBM Institute for Business Value wrote, "AI won't replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't." In the humanities, AI already affects the work of producing and analyzing texts themselves, and I use the term text very broadly. The next generation of scholars will need to understand how to use automation and AI tools explicitly to streamline and expand the processes of their learning and work. And they will need to be able to familiarize themselves with new AI research tools quickly. In other words, the impact of AI can't be ignored. I predict that we will all eventually use AI to organize and optimize aspects of our work and in the not too distant future. I predict that we will eventually use these tools as commonly as we now do Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, or more likely, if you're me, AI-enhanced Google Docs and slides. So now that we've covered the context, permit me to change directions a bit, because in my mind, the focus of this talk is not AI, or even the humanities. These are the context, and that is crucial to lay out, but my focus is on you, the humanists. What I hope is that we don't lose in this mad rush to understand AI and map new disciplinary territory is the individual. How will AI impact that person? How will it impact you sitting there, mind wandering, thinking about snacks right now? As humanists, and more importantly as individuals, we should reflect on the digital interfaces we use on a daily basis. This is a great place to start because AI is already incorporated into their back end as part of their service delivery. And we should keep in mind that interface design is a human process with human thinking and human biases incorporated into every aspect of design and use. We should already be thinking about the shaping influences of AI on our own subjectivity and how we ourselves composing meaning in the world with AI, which we're already doing whether we realize it or not. In other words, let's develop a humanistic perspective rooted in human values for thinking about and influencing decisions related to AI. Let me introduce two principal challenges that I believe AI places on you and me, the humanists, out here in the academic world and maybe even beyond. And then with my time remaining, I'll talk about four approaches to creating meaning, four frameworks that will help us all navigate all of these challenges. Well, I list two, there are more, but all of them with some satisfaction. Fear. People fear change, we fear loss, we fear losing autonomy and agency in our lives. For better or worse, AI is now a focal point of our present collective fear. What will it mean to be a human, to be ourselves, if we grow dependent on AI to know ourselves and to reach each other? Where we are expected to adopt new ways of communicating, of working, and yes, even of thinking. Will the velocity and momentum of change overwhelm and consume us? Our fears of the unknown, of the loss of control, is an omnipresent theme in the media coverage of AI. I don't have hard numbers on sentiment analysis towards AI, but I have seen articles talking about fear and AI in my news feeds daily for a year. And these are from very reputable news and opinion sites alike. We have a term, by the way. That term is moral panic, to describe the social mechanism by which people in power, if they feel threatened by potential shifts in social order, attempt to dominate something new. Through the stoking of moral panics, ideologues protect their power by transforming new phenomena into threats to be dealt with. These attacks are then amplified by media whose values and interests align with the narratives of power, and those devalue the thing and criticize everyone associated with it. We're beginning to see that with AI. Now, we also saw this in the 3rd century BCE. Plato wrestled with the technology of his day, which was papyrus. It may seem silly at first, but papyrus was the AI of Plato's contemporaries. Papyrus allowed people who could afford access to it and learned how to use it the ability to dramatically transform how they communicated and how they thought. They could share their ideas with others located in different places than their own body, where their voice would not travel. Their ideas could be saved and referred to in an indeterminate future because papyrus can travel in both space and exist in future time in the ways that voice cannot. Papyrus also enabled users of this amazing new technology, users who I'm going to call writers, to physically organize and curate their knowledge, expand their working memory, such that it transformed both their interpersonal relationships and their ability to transmit generational knowledge. It enhanced both of them a lot. But Plato, he was skeptical. In Phaedrus, he wrote about the ungodliness of writing, arguing it would ruin the minds of those who used it. Now, we have to keep in mind that Plato's fear was, in fact, realized. Writing did forever change how meaning was composed and shared, both in the individual and the collective. Something culturally significant was lost in how knowledge was circulated. Memory no longer served as a vast conceptual repository to be traveled like the halls of a grand palace. Instead, memory became distributed among the mind and the medium, papyrus, much like my own working memory is scattered between post-it notes, annotations in paper books, my phone, Google Drive, Zotero, dozens of Chrome tabs, a bunch of notebooks, printouts, several databases, archives, and other dusty corners of my cognizance. Now, each of these modalities and media of communication come with its own contribution to what I'm able to recall and to use at any given time. I shudder to think what Plato would say. But unlike Plato, I'm not so worried about being corrupted by the written word. It's already happened so thoroughly that my socialization and my education are dependent on it. I wouldn't be able to separate my own awareness from it. Now, this happens with the adoption of each new technology that contributes to the shaping of our mind. We see a moral panic of some degree with them as well. Papyrus, the printing press, radio, television, the digital calculator is a big one, the personal computer, the smartphone, and many other information mediating technologies. In fact, if a technology has the capacity to transform how we live, how we interact, how we communicate, and how we think, it's going to necessarily generate fear. And consumer-facing AI is doing all of these things faster than anyone can keep up with. Where automation played by our rules, automation only did what we told it to do within the narrow boundaries of predetermined uses for which we have implemented it. AI makes decisions. When we use AI, we're allowing the symbolic machine to interpret our input and make decisions that are completely opaque to us because they're based on the machine's own emergent learning or on the ideologies and through the algorithms of the creators. So this is the black box, and it often produces the unexpected. Sometimes we even say that the machine is hallucinating, and then we're doubly frightened. Not only do we not have control over the machine, but it doesn't seem like it's able to control itself. And we have to consider, like Plato of his contemporaries, how this new technology is shaping the structures of our memory, how it supports our thinking, and the consequences of this both collectively and individually. In other words, what are we gaining and what are we giving up? What is the trajectory of this new integration of man and machine into a new thinking being? Will we be even more of a cyborg than we are now with our smartphones nearly wired into our brains already through our eyes and our thumbs? At what point do we begin resembling peons of a larger collective consciousness, a la the Borg of Star Trek? I ask these questions not because I'm afraid, but because the humanities of all domains is a natural site to explore responses to these types of existential questions. The second challenge I would like to discuss is the challenge of influence. While some fear the shaping influences of AI and we have moral panics, others argue its virtues with a messianic vigor. I know we can all pick out a few social media personalities who are doing both. I've read and heard claims alike that AI will be an agent of transformation, unlimited productivity, unimagined opportunity, new forms of expression, even new states of being. These tendencies towards the extremes of both fear and faith alike are manifestations of a logical error in causality. One that I would be flirting with myself with the predictions that I'm making. In the studies of rhetoric, we refer to this error as technological determinism. Through technological determinism, we attribute to AI a manifest explanatory power of our rationalized emotional states, our hopes and fears, rather than attempting to discern through methodical observation the role that a phenomenon like AI plays. We know that we've fallen prey to technological determinism when we fail to see the larger context, the material, the cultural, the social, the personal, as we rush to make judgments. If we're using AI as a straw concept to make a point, that is technological determinism. The present reality of AI cannot be determined anecdotally. If we want to understand the influence of AI on us as individuals, through humanistic perspectives, we have to look empirically at how we're connected to it. We have to look beyond textual evidence, even its use in cultural production and consumption, all of which the humanity does quite well, by the way. But we have to go beyond that. We have to expand our search to include an entire network of literate activity that we engage in that touches on various aspects of AI use, and then what we do with that information. Where does AI exist in our lives? What are our points of interaction with specific AI tools in real and everyday contexts? That is what I am attempting to do here with this presentation and being transparent about AI being my partner. It is the question I play with in my mind. For the researcher, grounded theory and other empirical ethnomethods are also excellent, and by the way, more rigorous tools than what I'm doing right now, that allow us to construct studies of these emergent phenomena. AI tools might even make such studies, which are labor and resource intensive, more economically feasible for the underfunded researcher. By mapping and naming AI's world of usage, understanding its functional nodes of meaning, and for whom those nodes mean something, we can generate genuine insight to tell the story of AI in humanistic terms. We must be able to see AI more clearly as what Bruno Latour calls a mediatory, or an agent capable of transforming, translating, and distorting experience, and not in simplistic moral terms of good or evil. We have to take an active, a principled, and a measured approach to understanding the role of AI in the humanities, and more importantly, in the lives of people, ourselves included. We should focus on how we're using AI passively and now actively to compose meaning, because that use is changing everything, including us. Now, while I do not subscribe to technological determinism, I do see a corollary between our use of AI and the reality that we have to consider that AI, or at least its handlers, gain something valuable as well. Like all communicative activity, the use of AI is motivated and transactional on both ends. Something is given and something is received. We lean on parents, elders, teachers, and the institutional voices in our lives to guide our learning and the development of our character. Who will we be if the voices that guide us are no longer human? It won't necessarily be AI itself. It has no consciousness. It will be those who control it. Those who make these tools and who get to decide how they are used will have deep influence on our ideological awareness and our economic role in society. Who will these hegemonic influences be accountable to, if not us? Who will prevent them from using AI to extract labor and value from our lives and for their own profit? I'm reminded of Friedrich Nietzsche's famous line from Beyond Good and Evil. And if thou gaze long into an abyss, the abyss will also gaze into thee. Nietzsche's imagery is apt. The concept of neural entrainment explains to us that there is a strong and direct alignment between brain activity and specific input stimuli that the brain can interpret rhythmically and symbolically, especially, especially language. What neural entrainment allows us to understand is that if you're still following along with me, and you understand me. The electrical impulses of your brain are harmonized. The technical term for this is phase locked to the stimulus of my voice. Our brains, yours and mine, are connected through this processing of interpretable acoustic signals. This helps us describe a strong shaping influence that acts whenever we are speaking and listening. It changes how we think and how we learn. The implication I'm drawing is that it is that heterogeneity, in other words, the multiplicity, the many voices in our lives that contribute a great deal to our ability to conceive of new ideas, build diverse and critical perspectives, and more generally, develop a discerning judgment. And the opposite of that is also true. If you were to hear a single voice 24 hours a day as a form of torture, or a single set of ideas by your community or by people who already agree with and believe what you believe, soon enough, your brain not only begins to accept this as truth, but begins measuring other truths by it. There is a term for this process. It's called brainwashing. To recap, AI is already shaping how we think and communicate and will continue to do so, but probably not in apocalyptic or in messianic ways. The humanities are a natural place to pay attention to AI's shaping influence on the individual and on the collective alike. The relationship between the person and the machine that the person uses to compose meaning is a hermeneutic and symbiotic relationship. We have to engage our relationship with the technology to begin to understand it. And we have to do so while producers of this technology uh, don't have any more control or able to legislate our uses of it more than what they already do. Uh, it's something that we have to do for ourselves, and we have to do now. Uh, we have to remember that AI, like other communicative tools, are transactional and maybe even symbiotic mechanisms that all of us are offering ourselves in a Faustian bargain, a bargain that allows us access to the tool's amazing abilities, but in return, those tools are used to operationalize and control our attention, our focus, and our personal information in ways that further strengthen the dynamic of control itself. And the commodification of our attention and our time that we offer in trade for accessibility. So, what does so called composing meaning for ourselves look like in a technological world where the control of the tools we use to store our memory and support our cognition are ever more distant from our own hands? That's what I want you to think about. And I want you to keep thinking about it as you create social media content and query your AI assistants, because the relationship between our individual self and the tools we use to make meaning in the world is the most influential and intimate relationship with technology that we have. I would like to close with 4 things that each of us can do in our own lives to remain human thinkers, because they are how we compose meaning in our lives already, even if we sometimes use AI as we do them. I recommend these 4 things, these 4 frameworks: creativity, play, storytelling, and epistemological pluralism, not only because my research depends on them and my entire professional practice, but also my sense of what it means to be a humanist and a human in the world. I contend these 4 things: creativity, play, storytelling, and epistemological pluralism are part of what is essential to composing meaning for ourselves in any age, including that of AI. Creativity. The humanities tends to think of creativity as individual creativity. I will refer to that creativity with a small c, where the person is the source of inspiration. In the professional realm, creativity with a small c still has to conform to the rigors of tradition and the rigid demands of career advancement. In the humanities, despite the fact that we center creative production as core to our work, we don't reap its primary reward, which is leading us to unknown and interesting places. For this to happen in our work, we have to nurture the divergent works of scholars who are willing to take risks, do this ourselves, even when failure is the end result. A tolerance and appetite for failure is fundamental to creativity, because small c creativity cannot drive change and innovation. That requires big C creativity, which is the process of contributing to the transformation of an entire symbolic domain by doing things like taking a field in new directions, inviting or inventing a new technology. This is the work of a lifetime of rigorous pursuit, and it requires a particular set of conditions and perspectives, including a very liberal appetite for failure. And humanities is not so interested in promoting failure. Humanities wants to be like the sciences, or what it sees as being scientific. It wants to be respected and rigorous and repeatable. But Big C is not interested in metrics like H indexes and I-10 indexes and measuring impact and how many of this you did in a year and how many people went to that. It's not interested in following the paths of others. It follows its own course. For Big C to happen, we have to be willing to understand tradition, but then break away from it. As Alfred Korzybski reminds us, the map is not the territory. The present state of the humanities does not support field-changing innovation. Familiarity with scholarly and creative canon, getting your work in front of the right peers, and developing your reputation, all these things matter far too much in the humanities. And yes, they're necessary for big C breakthroughs, but slavish adherence to these things as if they were valuable in and of themselves kills big C and small c creativity alike. So let's each of us attempt something new with the intent to fail. Let us experiment with small c in our work and fail. Yes, fail, because failure, if fed properly, is both instructive and evolutionary in the development of big C. Be dynamic and daring and open to trying new things. Take your present expertise in new and unexpected ways. And when an unfamiliar challenge is the result and you fail, embrace that with appreciation. Play. In Western educational thought, an unhelpful dichotomy exists between the concepts of work and play. What is play? What is work? Why do we play? The concept of play has many more valences to it than might first appear. But in our context, let's say that play is, quote, free movement within a more rigid structure. It is not entirely free, but it's also not bound by typically predetermined rules or expectations. Play captures a range of human activities, motivations, and experiences in contrast to what is normatively expected or allowed. You already may notice that play and creativity go hand in hand. Play allows us to approach artifacts of culture and the social formations we create out of them with specific, often static intents and purposes. It allows us to treat all of that as optional rather than required. Play opens up new interpretations to what we might think we otherwise know for sure. It's a method of heuristic experimentation that lets us explore, identify, and maybe even subvert established order in innovative ways. Meaningful and reflective play is the primary mode of learning for children, but it's also for anyone whose practice depends on experimentation and innovation. If their play is important enough, someone will call it work. I encourage you to reject this dichotomy in your own lives. Find work that lets you play and play hard so that it sometimes feels like work. We have to hold play in high regard because even our many failures, if we continue to play and experiment as we engage the same old thing, we will do so with new eyes, a new spirit for appreciation, and learn from our mistakes. Storytelling, like our willingness to play, is also very important. Telling a story is one of our oldest cultural tools. My advice here echoes anthropologist Joseph Campbell. Keep telling human stories. Latour writes that how we view the organization of our collective lives is not static. It is always in motion, always changing, at virtually every level. It is contradictory and it is messy. Like play, storytelling is how we make sense of the mess, how we organize it in our minds and for other people. Through storytelling, we build the conceptual framework of our intuition, our cognition, and our communication. Without stories, we would have a hard time differentiating what is important because it is through narrative that we integrate information into frameworks of knowledge. And history. History has shown us that paradigmatic shifts in technology like AI don't just shape societies at the macro level. It also shapes how we engage with and interpret the consequences of who and what we gather around us, who and what we feel we are. It shapes our stories, how we describe ourselves, and our place in the world. And by story, I don't just mean first I did this and then this happened. I went to India, I gave a talk, afterwards I drank tea. The human mind can parse complex narrative fragments in a way that is responsive to context, that is, as Latour said, ever changing. And so story here is not necessarily traditional or even linear, but the mutable act of attaching meaning and consequence to action and event. It is referential, it's recursive, and it's exploratory. Imagine trying to explain that to Plato without the written word. Finally, before the briefest of conclusions, I want to mention the concept of epistemological pluralism. In the philosophy of rhetoric, we take this concept very seriously. The idea of epistemological pluralism is that there are multiple valid ways of knowing or perceiving truth. No method, no discipline, no field, and no domain of knowledge represents the only or the whole aspect of a phenomenon. Epistemological pluralism reminds us that human understanding is incomplete, fallible, and destined to change as we ourselves grow, both individually and in the collective. And as Latour says, our sense of who we are always changes. So just imagine poor Plato, worried about his papyrus, suddenly dropped into the 21st century, where the average person can't remember what they had for lunch yesterday. And through godless portable super machines, we take everywhere we can access an entire web of human knowledge so vast that any individual human mind is incapable of conceiving even a small part of it as a whole. So the reason I'm mentioning epistemological pluralism not just because it's an ethic to live by, but the recognition that we all do humanities a bit differently. It's a big tent of ideas and methods that through various cultural domains, such as the arts, literature, through fields of focus such as gender studies or art history, we create knowledge. Let's all recognize that each of us have something to contribute, and more importantly, something to learn from each other. By embracing epistemological pluralism, we resist the geriatric ossification of our own ideas and ideals, and we continue to generate human-based knowledge to build the truths that we need to prosper in a new AI world. And so here we've come to the end of my time. Let me close by saying my wish is that all of us continue to stand together. Let's use our best tools with our eyes open. Let us be interested in AI and develop a conceptual wholeness to our understanding of it and its impact. But as we do so, remember to keep the person an individual, you and I, at the center of this work. And in doing so, we may meet our new destiny with care and promise. Thank you. Dhanyavad. So don't be a stranger. Say hello, reach out to me on here, LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you tend to hang out the most. I would like to add that this presentation and all slides are free for you to use under the CC BY SA license. But if you do use them, of course, I would love it if you cited me because I am an academic. And even more importantly, let me know that you're using it where and how so that I can be excited for your work as well. Take care and bye-bye.